This is the American Law Journal.
Your doctor prescribes an antidepressant for your teenager, and you say yes because you trust him. But what if you knew that your doctor was prescribing the drug because a pharmaceutical company was singing that drug's praises? Good evening and welcome to season 24 on the American Law Journal. And tonight we'll look at, is your pharmaceutical company paying your doctor? Four guests will join me, but first, Glaxo-Smith Kline was hit with a $3 billion settlement with the U.S. government earlier this year. And it wasn't just because of its unsavory marketing practices. It unearthed an unhealthy alliance with doctors, and in one case, a very famous one. Gina Passarella takes this look.
Today I'm pleased to announce that the Justice Department and our law enforcement partners have reached an historic $3 billion resolution with the pharmaceutical manufacturer Glaxo-Smith Kline.
Months ago, GlaxoSmithKilne agreed to the largest pharmaceutical fraud settlement in U.S. history.
Who wants to be a millionaire?
Much of it because of illegal marketing, senior executives promising sales representatives big bonuses for pushing new products off-label. But prosecutors said the sales reps had help. For years, doctors had been paid kickbacks to overprescribe Glaxo drugs, including antidepressants, Wellbutrin and Paxil. U.S. Attorney Corman Ortiz said bribes to physicians took on many forms.
From Hawaiian vacations to paying doctors millions of dollars to go on speaking tours, to a European pheasant hunt, to tickets for Madonna concerts.
Doctor complicity in the scandal may have gotten lost in the big numbers, except court records mentioned at least one very recognizable doctor by name.
The problem now is, and this is what's getting me crazy, is that we have a problem with prescription drugs that is massive.
In its complaint, the U.S. government said Glaxo made two payments to Dr. Drew Pinsky for a total of $275,000 to promote Wellbutrin. Dr. Drew spoke eloquently about Wellbutrin, praising it for non-FDA-approved uses, but never revealing he was being paid by the drug company. This kind of conduct is what's behind new laws in 2013 to curtail the close financial relationship between docs and the pharmaceutical companies. Not to mention U.S. prosecutors continuing to investigate questionable and illegal practices of drug manufacturers.
You do the math. There are people in this room who are going to make an ungodly sum of money.
For the American Law Journal, I'm Gina Passarella.
With the new laws that are going to be coming down in January of 2013, I think some of the things we've just seen and that feature report may indeed change. Let's run it by my guest. Claudine Homolash joins us this evening from Scheller PC, the firm known for its products liability work. Claudine spends a good amount of her time doing whistleblower, qui tam work, and Federal False Claims Act work. Ed Silverman joins us this evening. He is a prize-winning journalist with Pharmalot. 6 years on now that he has started this particular venture, Pharmalot, covering the pharmaceutical industry for 16 years. Pharmalot started 6 years ago. And Ray Williams is here for the defense from DLA Piper, and Ray spends most of his time in litigation, whether it's medical malpractice, medical products liability, and medical device litigation. And joining us from Washington, D.C., from the CNN studios there, is Reshma Ramachandran. She is an American Medical Student Association individual. She works in tandem with the National Physicians Alliance and trying to clean up some of the things that are going on in med school. Ed, let's go to you first. In that feature report where we saw that Dr. Drew Pinsky, and many of us know, or at least love and watch Dr. Drew, $275,000 that he received from GlaxoSmithKline back in 1999. Of course, it blew up when this GSK settlement came down earlier this year. Is this an unusual number, and what's wrong with it, if anything?
It's unusual probably in the sense that he got more than the average physician would get for working for a drug company. Typically there's honoraria for speaking engagements, but usually in much smaller settings, not national television. But what's wrong with it is that he never declared that he was working for Glaxo while he was out there on radio or broadcast discussing one of their products. And that's really unethical in the sense that he hasn't a duty to disclose to the public that he's got an interest here. He comes off, he holds himself out as being an expert, an unaligned independent expert, when in fact he wasn't.
So Claudine, let's say that Dr. Drew actually told people on his program, okay, by the way, I'm extolling the virtues and the benefits of Wellbutrin, but I am receiving money from GlaxoSmithKline. He receives $275,000. You have no problem with that, right?
Oh, I have a big problem with that.
Really?
That's more than a salary or two or three or more.
So in other words, the transparency is not enough for you, for plaintiffs? For
no, not at all. Because I think, and this is where doctors not only have to disclose that, but also patients need to be aware in many instances that their doctors are getting paid by these drug companies. And then if they are, they can ask their doctors that, you know, are you receiving monies from any drug companies? And if you are, for what drugs? And then they can ask if they're being treated, you know, are they on those drugs and why? Are those the best drugs for them? And the only way to do that is to require doctors to disclose that information. Doctors aren't going to want to do that because we know for certain that monies influence doctors' prescribing habits.
So Ray, even if he reveals the fact that he's getting the money, there's something wrong with that figure.
Why? For a doctor to make $275,000 promoting a product, I don't necessarily see anything wrong with that number per se, especially with the transparency that you talked about.
Okay.
Can I interrupt?
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, the American Medical Association's Code of Ethics allows for doctors to only receive gifts of minimal value that are helpful to patients in a way. $275,000, I can't imagine what value did that doctor give to the drug company that's worth $275,000?
Well, I mean,
it sounds like a kickback to me.
Well, I know. I mean, everything sounds like a kickback to anytime a doctor receives money, it has to be a kickback. But let's face the reality that these doctors are more educated in medicine than you or I. And so the fact that they are promoting a product that they believe in, I don't see anything wrong with that, even if they are getting paid. And these patients clearly need a product.
Let me go to Reshma. You haven't started your practice yet, but again, you're very much integrally involved in the American Medical Students Association. These kind of topics must come up fairly frequently. In fact, maybe you watched with some interest what happened with Dr. Drew and the Glaxo-Smith Kline settlement.
Yes, indeed. I did watch with interest with what happened with Dr. Drew and Glaxo-Smith-Kline, especially because starting from day one in medical school, we are often the targets of pharmaceutical marketing. Studies have shown that medical students actually, in 1 year without any protection from conflict of interest policies, encounter pharmaceutical representatives over 20 times per year. And the problem with such a large figure for Dr. Drew is that if he actually really believed in the medication, you know, why doesn't he need to get paid to promote it? And on top of that, we've heard from many doctors who sit on speakers bureaus that instead of offering objective evidence behind the drug, they often become marketing tools for the pharmaceutical companies and offer marketing-based education to medical students and also to patients rather than evidence-based education.
Well, I think we need to make a distinction to some extent, certainly, between Drew and the average physician that's been referred to so far, because he's been out there as almost as an entertainer. He's on broadcast, whether it was radio or TV, and he's talking to the public at large. He's not necessarily talking to any one individual patient or as a speaker, as part of a speakers bureau to other doctors at a dinner event. And there's a distinction there because he is being taken at his word that he's an honest broker. And whether the amount is $50,000 or $125,000 or more, the amount itself in that context really doesn't matter. It's how he held himself out and failed to make clear to his audience, the public audience, not just individual patients, that he did not, that he was taking money to promote a specific product and did not make that clear or attempt to make
right.
that
So
clear.
Ed, with you, it's not the dollar figure so much. It's not just the dollar figure, but most it's the lack of transparency. And Reshma, you would say the same thing. It's a lack of transparency, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's definitely the lack of transparency, and for the not just for the public, you know, for the public at large. As a physician, we subscribe to this idea of medical professionalism, where we are supposed to use objective, evidence-based judgment to provide the best treatment for our patients. And what Dr. Drew did was to the public was not, you know, subscribe to medical professionalism, but instead became a tool for the pharmaceutical company in promoting the drug that he was doing for Glaxo-Smith-Kline.
Yeah, are you saying his promotion of the drug was, what he was saying was wrong? That he was lying to the public?
It was misleading indeed.
How was
Some of the claims that he made, for instance, For instance, for Wellbutrin, one of the claims he had made regarding the sexual side effects of that drug was in fact very exaggerated, and there was no robust scientific evidence behind it.
Okay. All I'm saying is that do you think your colleagues are being paid to lie? I think at the end of the day, as a medical doctor, as a professional that you'll be someday, you will not be influenced by the pharmaceutical companies, even if they are paying you to promote a product. The pharmaceutical companies do not give the doctors a script and say, you must read this or we will not pay you. The doctors are free to say whatever they want to say about the product.
That's not true.
It's very true.
Unfortunately, that's not true. Unfortunately, that's not true. We know this from dealing with medical school deans and from compliance officers of various institutions, that instead of doctors having control over the material that they speak about regarding the drugs, that pharmaceutical companies give them slide sets that they can manipulate and still call them physician-owned, but instead the material is really developed by the pharmaceutical companies. And many doctors who have been on speakers bureaus for both pharmaceutical companies and medical device companies have told us the same thing, that instead of them offering objective evidence based on their experience and clinical practice, that pharmaceutical companies tailor their message so that it's a marketing ploy rather than objective scientific evidence.
But they're free to make the changes they want to make to those slides. They're free to do whatever they want with those slides.
Actually, they're not. Actually, they're not.
They are.
We've heard this from various compliance officers that pharmaceutical companies, in fact, are the last people to see those slide sets and make final changes.
Rishma, I've understood that your organization and several other organizations are trying to school medical students to change their attitude when it comes to dealing and interacting with pharmaceutical companies. Now, from what I understand, it doesn't mean to never take money. You're not saying that doctors should never, ever take money or any kind of honoraria from a pharmaceutical company, correct? We're not going down that road, are we?
No, we're not. There's been a great collaboration between the industry and medicine in terms of advancing innovation in treatments, and we definitely support that. But when the relationships start promoting marketing-based education rather than evidence-based education, there's a problem.
You're actually grading medical schools on how they are creating a divide. There's some breathing room, if you will, arm's length relationship with pharmaceutical companies. And I'm just going to put up on the screen here some of the med schools in our greater Philadelphia area where this program comes out of. And actually, most of them are getting very good grades. UPenn, University of Pittsburgh across the state, Temple and Drexel and others, they're all getting A's and B's. There's only one osteopathic college that's getting, something below a C. So long story short, in our area and many other areas as well, medical schools are comporting to the kind of behavior that I think you and your organization would like to see.
Definitely. I think medical schools and especially the administration is recognizing the importance of keeping scientific integrity in medical education. Since the inception of the AMSA Farm Free Scorecard, we've seen a dramatic change in culture amongst the administration and medical students in terms of conflict of interest and maintaining appropriate relationships with industry. All
right, Rishma Ramachandran from the American Medical Students Association and also working in tandem with a number of organizations, including the National Physicians Alliance. Thank you for joining us and good luck with your projects.
Thank you very much.
All right, have a good evening. So, I mean, again, I think that there's some level of agreement. Claudine, you're looking at me a little quizzically, but I think there is some agreement here on the panel that as long as there's transparency, there's not a problem with money changing hands. You seem to have trouble with the amount of money changing hands.
Well, I also have not just the amount of money so much, but the blurred line between education and promotion. Are these doctors being recruited by the pharmaceutical companies to go out and educate other physicians, or are they being recruited because they are high prescribers and highly influential in the medical community? That's what I see in the whistleblower cases. Particularly, that these drug companies are targeting, and they use the word targeting, targeting doctors to talk to other doctors to essentially sell their drug. And that's what they're doing, and it works.
Bad eggs, Ed Silverman, a few bad eggs?
Are there a few bad apples, a few bad eggs? There are always a few bad apples. There will be even after we get the law enacted. The real issue, though, right now, and it has been for the last few years, is changing the thinking and the behavior so that we have not just transparency, but a real devotion to making medical practice and making medical research the most honest endeavor that we could possibly have, and not have it, I don't want to use the word corrupted in a negative or criminal way, but tainted by influence that changes judgment. And that's really the issue. It's amorphous. It's hard to quantify some of that sometimes. But we've seen through litigation and other instances, Senate probes, where unfortunately this behavior has come out and it has not gone away on its own. And that's why we need the law.
And that's what we're going to get to in just a moment. When we come back, ProPublica and their database. Would you like to find out what your doctor received from a pharmaceutical company last year? And what about this new Physicians Payment Sunshine Act? What will that force pharmaceutical companies to do in 2013? Back in just a moment.
Tonight's American Law Journal has been made possible in part by Scheller PC, a nationally recognized personal injury law firm protecting individuals against dangerous pharmaceutical medicine, including antidepressants, antipsychotic drugs, defective products and medical devices, and other personal injury matters. Blank Rome, providing strategic advice for employers in today's workplace. And The Legal Intelligencer, the nation's oldest legal newspaper for lawyers.
Is your doctor receiving payments from a pharmaceutical company? And if he is there a problem with that? I'm talking with three guests tonight, and all of them have their own unique perspective. Claudine Homolash is a plaintiff's attorney. She represents individuals in product liability and personal injury matters. Ed Silverman is with us this evening. He is with Pharmalot. He writes about the pharmaceutical industry. Probably no surprise to him how many people go to his blog and to his website each and every day to see what is happening in that industry. Ed, a former prize-winning journalist with the Newark Star-Ledger, and now 6 years with Pharmalot, 17 years covering the pharmaceutical industry. And playing cornerback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Oh, no, I'm sorry, he's wearing his other hat tonight. The defense attorney tonight for the defense, Raymond Williams. And Ray spends most of his time in litigation, whether it's medical malpractice, medical products liability, and medical device litigation. You know, in the last 5, 6, 7 years, we've seen some blockbuster settlements with the U.S. government between pharmaceutical companies and the U.S. government. Going back 6, 7 years ago, the product Neurontin was the poster child for bad marketing practices by pharmaceutical companies, and it was $400 million, and everyone was aghast. Now, in just the last, 3, 4 years, we've seen $1.1 billion, $1.3 billion, $2.3 billion. We just saw $3 billion this last year, Ed Silverman. What does this have to do? What do these huge settlements have to do with pharmaceutical companies and doctors?
Well, what it means is that the federal government has, over the last decade or so, caught on to the fact that there have been violations of federal law concerning marketing practices. It's called off-label promotion, for instance, where drugs are promoted to or marketed for uses that were not approved by the FDA. And these big figures reflect an effort by the government to tag the drug makers and say, this is real dollars we're talking about. Some argue that it becomes the cost of doing business because $2 billion may be paid out for a drug that over a decade generated $25 billion.
And let me say this, Chris, the pharmaceutical companies are in a no-win position. Anytime the Department of Justice or the Attorney General's office comes after you and says you did something wrong, at some point the question really is, are we going to pay? The question is, how much are we going to pay?
Claudine, your perspective from plaintiffs.
This really goes back to kickbacks that we were talking about in the beginning of the series. Whistleblower cases, these False Claims Act cases, where you have these major settlements that are happening right now, they have to do with off-label promotion of drugs. Doctors are allowed to prescribe a drug for a use for which it's not FDA approved, but a pharmaceutical company can't tell that doctor to do that. And what the drug companies are doing is they're paying kickbacks to doctors so that the doctors will prescribe off-label. And that's resulting in Medicare and Medicaid fraud. And that's why the government's coming after these drug companies. And the drug companies wouldn't be paying these big settlements if they did not do something wrong.
Let's take a quick look at what's happening in 2013, because get ready, folks. If you're a doctor, if you're a pharmaceutical company, you're going to be enrolled. The new Affordable Health Care Act is rolling out the Physicians Payment Sunshine Act. It's effective on January the 1st, 2013. Pharmaceutical and medical device companies will be required to account for the benefits provided to physicians in the course of regular sales. Travel, gift, meals, honorarium, and other costs above $25 will have to be reported. It must include itemized dates, values, and nature of each benefit, and the fines can range from $10,000 to $100,000. And without getting into the politics of Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act, looking at just the Physician Payment Sunshine Act, Claudine, is this something that needed to be done because the industry would not police itself?
Yes, but also I think people need to be aware of what their doctors are receiving. But absolutely, the industry has just run astray. I mean, it's gone wild. They are throwing money at doctors left and right. They're paying doctors to conduct studies, even to ghostwrite certain articles. What that means is the pharmaceutical company actually writes the article and then slaps a doctor's name on it.
For a medical journal.
That's right.
That hasn't happened in years, but okay. I think the industry has done a very good job of cleaning up itself. I mean, I think a lot of the issues that we have in litigation relating to that are based on times going back to the 1990s and maybe some early 2000 studies. But I think today, in 2012, the industry perception really is important to them, and I think they realize that it's been the perception. What's happened at the end of the day hasn't really had an effect on the treatment.
What do you mean, what's happened? When you say, in other words, you're talking about the money that they've received, or honoraria, golf trips,
absolutely,
dinners. You don't think at the end of the day that has impacted individuals?
Not significantly.
Not their health.
At all. At the end of the day, if you have diabetes, you need a medication to treat you for the diabetes.
But if your doctor is receiving money from one drug company to push, essentially, a certain diabetes medication, and that medication might carry more risk than another medication, and you're receiving that medication, brand name maybe, possibly over a generic, that could cost the patient much cheaper. You know, it could be less. There's a whole host of problems with receiving money.
And how do the lawyers get involved? Let's make it clear for the audience how lawyers get involved. So let's say someone gets the wrong drug because the doctor is receiving a handsome payment from a pharmaceutical company. How do you get involved, Claudine?
Well, the person's injured and then they contact us. But then one of the first questions asked is, was that doctor visited by a drug sales rep from the company who manufactured the drug? What did that sales rep tell him? How many times did that sales rep visit him? Did that sales rep give him samples that he handed out to his patients? You know, was that doctor influenced by that drug company? And more often than not, yes.
And Ed, I think from your vantage point, you would say, look, we're not saying take all the money out of the system. We're not saying never write a check to a doctor. But I guess under these new laws, even if you write a check for $25 or more, it's going to be reported. Now, you've probably heard this, the pharmaceutical industry, and I think docs don't like this at all.
But no, doctors don't like it because they feel that their honor is being impugned, that they can't be influenced. But the reality is studies have shown that influence of this sort does happen. Like it or not, it's human nature. It all comes back to that. And we can't fight or change that because every generation has to learn anew.
And again, we talk about what the government is going to do January 1, 2013, but in some ways there have been some private groups that have already been doing something akin to this. I mean, ProPublica has a database of doctors and what they've received from pharmaceutical companies. So are doctors going to recoil and say, I'm not going to do research, I'm not going to help a pharmaceutical company, I'm not going to put my name out there because all of a sudden my receiving $33,000 last year from Glaxo is going to taint me?
Some might do that, and some might say, I'll take it as it comes.
So, Ed, what are we to think right now as to how this trend may affect research? Because, you know, there were a couple of doctors who actually wanted to be on our program tonight, and they received some money from pharmaceutical companies, and they said, Chris, you know, the $33,000 I got from Glaxo last year was absolutely legitimate, but if I get on and talk about that, guess what? I'm not going to get any more research money. That's fair too, isn't it?
Well, as I said before, if they can hold their head up high and explain what they're doing and why, and continue to treat patients properly, then they have the right to do that, and patients have the right to react. As far as medical research goes, it depends upon the arrangement. If they're working in academia, if they're working individually, most of the time these are higher profile people working at universities or medical centers. So they're going to want to stay out of the limelight, if you will, which is probably why they're not here tonight. It's an uncomfortable situation.
It's interesting to me, though, that everybody except for the doctors certainly are able to make money off of the pharma industry. I mean, and Ed's I'm listening to him, and he's doing a great job with his articles and his blog and his writing, but he's making money off of the pharmaceutical industry writing about it. The pharmaceutical companies, as was pointed out, they do have a obligation to their stockholders to make a profit. I understand that. And now we have the doctors who are actually, I think, doing the public a service, Chris, in the sense that they are putting out information on products, again, that individuals need. They need it, and so they have choices, and the doctors are providing those choices to them. And the truth is, they're doing clinical trials and clinical research, and they're getting data that's going to help drug companies produce better drugs.
I didn't say they shouldn't make money. I'm just saying that in the context of disclosure and transparency and human nature, and how, if at all, those actions or lack of actions may influence the decisions when it comes to the data that's gathered and disclosed by the drug companies. As far as the doctors go, if they do legitimate work, they deserve legitimate pay.
Claudine, your point you'd like to make, and then I've got one last point.
But the doctors are treating patients, and the patients should be able to know whether their doctor is receiving large sums of money from the drug company.
They can ask their doctor.
Well, then and that leads me to my next question, because between ProPublica and what the government is going to do, again with the new Physicians Payment Sunshine Act, we're going to be able to find out that information. We can find out a lot of information right now. I mean, I looked at some of my docs to see what they received last year. I'm sure you could do that as well. But now with this new act, what's going to happen? Paint a picture for me of how it's going to improve the relationship between the pharmaceutical companies and doctors, and how consumers are going to do better in the end. And maybe there's less litigation that Claudine and her firm is going to be able to bring forward, because all of a sudden these laws are working. I mean, ultimately, we don't want to have all these multi-billion-dollar lawsuits.
Yeah, and I think I've said all along that transparency is important. But at the end of the day, from a litigation standpoint, as a litigator, as a defense lawyer, I love this. I mean, I think that it will help us tremendously as we go to court.
And what about you, Claudine, your perspective? How is this new, again, Physician Payment Sunshine Act going to affect what you do on a daily basis, do you think?
I'm not sure how much it really will, because I think the drug companies will find more innovative ways to market their drug. I mean, direct-to-consumer advertising, for instance, the commercials that you see on TV. I turn on the television, I see a commercial every 10, 15 minutes for a different drug. And
I saw Len Lundy on TV the other day, who's a plaintiff's attorney, so I understand that.
But I think there may be some more pharmaceutical commercials than even lawyer commercials these days.
There are a lot of those commercials, and why are those commercials on TV? Because so then the patient sees it and goes to their doctor and says, I saw a commercial for this, do you think I need this drug? It works.
That's a good thing, though. That is actually a good thing, that a patient will go and talk to their doctor.
I want to thank my three guests for joining us tonight, and the conversation isn't finished. In fact, I'm sure it's going to continue in the green room after tonight's program. Claudine Homolosh hails from Scheller PC, representing the plaintiffs in medical malpractice and medical product liability matters. Ed Silverman is with Pharmalot. He is the founder and key blogger with Pharmalot, former writer with the Newark Star Ledger, and Ray Williams with DLA Piper. And Ray, next time you're on the program, you may have to bring your own doctor. So for all of us here at the American Law Journal, thanks for joining us. Until next week, case closed.